where were we? Ah, yes! 20 things you didn't know about Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, Part 2. 11. The shooting schedule used humorous scene descriptions to avoid leaks. Leaks are a recurring problem on just about any Star Trek movie. On Star Trek II, there were a variety of attempts to put a stop to them. On November 18th, 1981, only a few days into principal photography, Robert Sallin sent out a memo restricting dailies to members of the cast, crew, and production staff. On the same date, he sent out detailed instructions regarding set visitors for the duration of the shoot. No one could visit without a pass, and on 10 days where story-sensitive scenes were scheduled to be filmed, no visitors, pass or otherwise, would be admitted. Harv Bennett even had his secretary insert unique typos into each copy of the script so they could trace down the culprit if a copy got leaked. When a copy did, the perpetrator was quickly identified as none other than Gene Roddenberry. One of the more humorous ways the production kept a lid on certain plot developments can be found by looking at the film's shooting schedule. For the work covering January 26th to 29th, 1982, which was at the end of principal photography, although the crew would reassemble for some reshoots in March, the paperwork omits accurate scene descriptions. Instead, only ludicrous and obviously untrue scene descriptions were used. Some examples: interior, Enterprise bridge, day. Honeycombs explode. Cast and crew scatter for cover. Interior, reactor room, day. Spock comes back to life, really pissed off. Swears revenge on Kirk. Interior, reactor room, day. Spock kills Kirk. Takes commands of Enterprise. Sends Sulu for sushi. 10. The idea for the Genesis device came from the art department. Mike Miner, the art director on Star Trek II, had a long history with the franchise. He got a start in the business with a variety of contributions during the third season of the original television series. These included on-set paintings, seen in the episodes In Truth Is There No Beauty and The Tholian Web, the design and animation of the web itself, rear projection graphics, the fabrication of the Melkot alien Inspector of the Gun, and the visual effect for the Beta-12A whirligig entity in Day of the Dove. On the aborted Star Trek Phase 2 television series and Star Trek the Motion Picture, Miner worked as a production illustrator and contributed to the redesign of the USS Enterprise interiors. On Star Trek II, working under production designer Joe Jennings, Miner produced storyboards, production illustrations, and paintings for concepts like the Genesis Cave. But perhaps his most significant contribution to Star Trek II had nothing to do with his work in the art department. It was Miner's idea that the movie's central device should be a terraforming device, rather than the Omega System superweapon originally conceived by writer Jack B. Sowards. This led to the Genesis device, and reportedly caused Harv Bennett to tell Miner that his idea saved Star Trek. 9. Pixar's first computer-generated sequence for a movie was the Genesis demo. Pixar started in 1979 as a division of Lucasfilm called the Graphics Group. It would be spun off as its own corporation under the Pixar name in 1986. A team of experts under the leadership of Dr. Alvy Ray Smith, the Graphics Group was assembled by George Lucas to develop technique for using computers in movies. At first, recalled Alvy in 2002, this meant working on digital video editor, a digital audio synthesizer, and a digital optical printer. Alvy's team, however, wanted to do more. When Robert Sallin approached them to create the Genesis demo sequence for Star Trek II, Alvy recognized it as an opportunity for him and his team to prove themselves. The initial idea Sallin presented was far less ambitious than what ended up in the movie. There would be an aquarium with a rock floating in it, and somehow things started to grow on this rock, recalled Alvy in 2002. Alvy asked for 24 hours so he could storyboard a more ambitious sequence that he knew his team could execute, and Sallin agreed. Alvy spent the night furiously drawing storyboards that played to the strength of his team. Since he had experts on fractal mountains, particle systems, and craters, he incorporated all of those ideas into his proposal, and the next day, Sallin told them to proceed with the work. The final sequence was a major step forward for CGI in a motion picture, representing the longest single such sequence until the release of Tron later that summer. Paramount got its money's worth on the Genesis demo sequence too, reusing it extensively in Star Trek III: The Search for Spock and in Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. 8. The Reliant was originally the same class of ship as the Enterprise. In early versions of the script, the Reliant was the same class of ship as the Enterprise, which would have allowed the production to save money and reuse the expensive model built for Star Trek the Motion Picture. However, at some point it was decided that it was more important for the two ships to be easily distinguishable during the film's pivotal space battles. Said production designer Joseph Jennings in a 2002 interview, "In a dogfight, you had to instantly recognize which ship you were looking at, and so they had to be different. At the same time, you had to make them look like they came from the same culture and had the same technology. The result of this design philosophy photography was the USS Reliant, which Jennings designed with Lee Cole and Mike Miner. Instantly recognisable as a Starfleet vessel, there was nonetheless little chance of confusing it with the Enterprise. Despite the design change, however, the first description of the Reliant was never updated in the script, even as late as the May 24th, 1982 revised final draft, which still reflects the writer's original intention. In foreground is the USS Reliant, an older, somewhat battered starship of the Enterprise class, with a slightly different configuration. 7. Walter Koenig kept his big mouth shut when it came to Chekhov never having met Khan. At the start of November 1981, Harve Bennett sent actor Walter Koenig the latest draft of the film's script and asked him to do a Trekkie run on it. By that point, Bennett had screened all 79 episodes of the television series and the first movie, but he was still relatively new to the Star Trek phenomenon. Koenig obliged and sent off his notes on November 2nd, 1981. Among the things Koenig pointed out in his memo, Klingon neutrality zone should be corrected to Klingon neutral zone. The script's multiple references to the crew sent flying should be replaced due to the safety belts established in Star Trek the Motion Picture. He suggested the addition of an acerbic exchange between McCoy and Spock somewhere within the bowels of the story. He suggested that Scotty yelling, "Get back there, you yellow dogs," to his engineering crew was out of character and should be dropped. But one thing that he didn't note anywhere in his memo? That Chekhov and Khan never met in the original series. Koenig didn't join the cast until the second season, well after Space Seed marooned Khan and his followers on SETI Alpha 5. Koenig admitted to leaving this out on purpose years later in his memoir, Warped Factors. My concern was if that I mentioned it, the decision might be made to change the actor rather than change the dialogue. I love George Takei, but you've got to take my word for it. I can give a good SETI eel scream. I can't imagine the dignified Mr. Sulu being as effective. 6. Spock and Savik's Vulcan dialogue was filmed in English. Early in Star Trek II, Captain Spock and Lieutenant Savick have a brief exchange in Vulcan with English subtitles after Kirk boards the Enterprise. You may be surprised to learn, however, that this scene was filmed in English. The Vulcan dialogue was written after the fact by linguist Mark Okrand, who would go on to develop the Klingon language in Star Trek III to match Leonard Nimoy and Kirstie Alley's lip movements, and then looped by the actors in post-production. In 2018, Okrand recalled a fortuitous 1982 lunch meeting with a friend who worked at Paramount. She said, "That's really interesting. We've been talking to linguists. There's this scene in the movie where Mr. Spock and this female Vulcan character have a conversation. When they filmed it, the actors were speaking English, but in post-production, everyone thinks it would be better if they were speaking Vulcan. They wanted a linguist to come and make up gobbledygook that matches the lip movements." And I said, "I can do that." On February 19th, 1982, DeForest Research weighed in with a memo including the following about Vulcan pronunciation. Please note that the Vulcan words should be pronounced with a short E sound. For instance, ki should be ke, di should be de, etc. Finally, the subtitled dialogue was revised to make it a little harder to tell the actors weren't speaking Vulcan on set. The same technique was used for the Kolinar scene set on the planet Vulcan in Star Trek the Motion Picture. 5. The Starfleet training facility is mostly a model. As Kirk thanks Spock for his birthday present, they stop in a large skylighted room featuring planters and a very large glass celestial globe. But this set isn't really a set, it's mostly a model. Specifically, it's the foreground miniature or cutting piece, a carefully designed miniature placed between the camera and the actual set. On screen, it appears to be part of the set, creating a more elaborate setting than is possible, practical, or affordable to build. In this instance, the only real set is the door Kirk stands in front of and the short corridor. Everything around it is a model the camera is shooting through. Art director Joe Jennings explained that artist Mike Miner went out to several hardware stores and came back with a bird bath, a planter, and a bunch of junk, which he then used to construct the convincing cutting piece and make cinema-scale set that was in reality very small. The same technique was employed by Mike Miner in the motion picture. The first shots of Spock on Vulcan were filmed on location at the Minerva Terrace in the Mammoth Hot Springs in Yellowstone National Park. Leonard Nimoy as Spock was on a small terrace of patterned tile. Between him and the camera was a foreground miniature of a higher terraces with the same tile pattern and the head of one of the giant statues, which appears 10 feet long but was actually 15 times smaller. Alas, the shot was badly redesigned when it was combined with a matte painting, and almost no one sees either Spock or the clever miniature. 4. ILM doled down the Enterprise. The very expensive and beautifully detailed Enterprise miniature from Star Trek the Motion Picture was of course going to be reused in the vastly cheaper Star Trek II, but the effects for the sequel were contracted out to George Lucas's Industrial Light and Magic. For the first film, the Enterprise was shot at the studio of VFX master Doug Trumbull, who disliked using blue screens for matte work, preferring a technique called high-con matting, where the models were shot against black, which he also used at Blade Runner. But ILM worked mostly with blue screen matte photography, and the trouble began as soon as they put the Enterprise before before the camera. The model's intricate, beautiful, expensive, pearlescent and highly reflective paint job reflected the glowing blue of the screen, known as the blue screen spill, which would cause matte errors resulting in apparent holes in the starship. Repainting the entire model was too big a task for such a tightly budgeted feature, so they assigned a newcomer named Bill George to kill any reflections that showed up. The high-tech technique used? Wherever a reflection was a problem, Bill sprayed the area with dull coat, and a powder puff was used to pat talcum powder in to eliminate the shine. You can actually see this in the film. Notice how much shinier the Enterprise is when it first approaches the Reliant than it is later in the film. Since they applied the battle damage to the models, their scenes were shot roughly in sequence. As a result, the ship got duller and duller as more and more shiny hotspots were tamped down. 3. Judson Scott gave up his screen credit by mistake. Fans of the short-lived television shows The Phoenix, 1981 to 1982, V, 1984 to 1985, and The Colbys, 1985 to 1987, might recognise actor Judson Scott in the role of Joachim, Khan's most vocal follower, but they won't see the actor's name in the Wrath of Khan credits. That's because the actor authorised his agents to waive his billing for the movie. They did just that, sending associate producer William F. Phillips a letter on February 5th, 1982, indicating that Scott does not want screen credit in the picture. A year after the movie opened, Scott told Starlog magazine that the whole thing was a foul-up. His agents had been negotiating for higher billing. Scott wanted to be in the opening titles with the Star Trek regulars, but had been rebuffed. Scott agreed to waive billing under the mistaken impression that this meant his name would only appear in the end credits. In the end, he wasn't credited at all. This was the last time he made that mistake. 2. A baby among Khan's followers was edited out during post-production. If you've read the novelization or the shooting script for Star Trek II, you'll know about an odd subplot involving a child who is found among Khan's followers, which gives Chekhov the opportunity for his signature scream. This is for scene 18 of the script, when Chekhov and Tyrell are outside the Botany Bay's cargo carriers. As Chekhov looks at the porthole, a face suddenly looks back. It is the face of a child. The apparition scares the daylights out of Chekhov and us. He screams. At first, Tyrell doesn't believe Chekhov telling him, "You're crazy." But when they enter Khan's quarters, they find the child inside. Tyrell leans down and asks, "Where's your mommy and daddy?" Seconds later, Chekhov notices a hanging seatbelt with the name SS Botany Bay emblazoned on it, and he begins to panic. "What about the child?" asks Tyrell. "Never mind. Hurry, hurry," Chekhov shouts back. When it was decided to excise the child from the movie, the scene was re-edited, and Tyrell was dubbed with the somewhat unconvincing line, "What about the tricorder?" Pay attention, and you can tell right where it happens. When Tyrell kneels down to examine the City Eel tank, he is in the first compartment, and when we next see him, he is kneeling just inside the second compartment facing the cropped out child. Per the shooting script, the child doesn't appear again until scene 213A, when the Genesis torpedo has been activated in the Reliant transporter room for this rather unsettling moment. There sits the Genesis torpedo. Lights start blinking in response. As we watch, the child we met on Ceti Alpha walks toward the torpedo and smiles at the lights. Many sources claim this was supposed to be Khan's baby, but nothing in the shooting script identifies the child's parents. When reviewing the script, Gene Roddenberry complained that the child remains an isolated event. Is it a mirage? Is it Khan's baby? Clarification and integration needed. That clarification, however, never occurred, and it's easy to see why the character was cut during post-production. After being discovered by Tyrell and Chekhov, the child is never seen or mentioned again, save for the final scene where it crawls up to the Genesis torpedo shortly before detonation. 1. Star Trek II broke box office records and turned a tidy profit, but not according to Hollywood accounting. When Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan opened in June of 1982, it grossed $14,346,221. This was the largest opening weekend in movie history, surpassing the previous record holder, Superman 2, by about $250,000. According to a New York Times report from June 8, 1982, the film was projected to turn a tidy profit, unlike the previous installment. It is also clear that Star Trek II is going to earn a much higher profit than the original Star Trek. That movie cost $42 million, did very well at the box office and barely broke even, including television and cable sales. Star Trek II cost less than $12 million. Star Trek II had actually cost $13 million, while Star Trek the Motion Picture cost at least $44 million. But this does not diminish the newspaper's larger point. At the end of the day, Star Trek II recorded a domestic box office take of $78.9 million, with $40 million going to Paramount in rentals. Against a budget of $13 million, that would mean a rough profit of $27 million, a number which does not include overseas box office, television sales, or any ancillary revenues. In comparison, Star Trek the Motion Picture grossed $82.3 million and brought in $56 million in revenues. Against a $44 million budget, that only meant a profit of $12 million, less than half of what the studio took home from the sequel. Of course, in classic Hollywood accounting style, that's not what Paramount reported to anyone who was owed a percentage of the profits. Individuals who were owed a piece of the pie included Harve Bennett, Leonard Nimoy, William Shatner, Gene Roddenberry, and Jack P. Sowards. Paramount told this group that as of September 23, 1983, the movie was somehow $7,448,200 in the red. Inevitably, this resulted in an audit, the results of which are not known to this author, who sadly is not a profit participant in Star Trek II. This was not the first time or the last time an audit was required to get the studio to pay out profit participation owed from a Star Trek project. For many years, the studio claimed the original series had lost money until a threat of a lawsuit led them to finally pay out to Shatner, Roddenberry, and other profit participants in 1984. And there's our list, 20 things you didn't know about Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Please let us know what you thought about this video in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you'll be notified about our upcoming videos. Note special thanks to Morris Molyneux, John Tenuto, and Mary Jose Tenuto for their help with this article. I have been the king of dodgy accounting, Sean Ferrick, for Trek Culture, and you have been awesome. Thanks.